from here if you don't have any luck getting in. Yeah. Yep. You talk, and I'll introduce always. And so Melissa is going to be helping us in the chat. I see Adam Hager is as well. So we'll go ahead and kick things off here, and I'll let Zach introduce himself,
Absolutely.
And you can tell us, how you got here to White Heath and what your background is, and tell us all about you.
Perfect. My name's Zach Lancaster. I am a senior field agronomist with Bayer Crop Science in the Field Solutions segment of our business.
So that answers a question I got yesterday: is what your title is?
Yeah.
And I apologize. I said, we'll just call him a weed scientist until we find out better.
That's the majority of what I do.
So now we know.
Within Field Solutions, we are the crop protection wing of development within Bayer. So we're working on fungicides, insecticides, herbicides, also biologicals. So we look at some seed treatment options as well.
Okay.
But a little bit of background on myself. I'm not a native Midwestern, if you can't tell by the accent. I'm originally from Arkansas. If I'd stayed on the farm, I would have been fourth generation rice and soybean farmer.
Okay.
So a completely different kind of setup than what's going on here in Illinois. I mean, a lot of it can be transitioned into understanding, but we grow things a little bit different down there. This is the greatest soil on earth up here, and we were not blessed with that same water holding capacity. And so we did a lot of irrigation, a lot of different practices. So it is kind of a different system up here. But I went to University of Arkansas for grad school. I actually came up here a year before the job was available for a weed contest. And I remember thinking, hey, I really like this area. If something ever opened up in Illinois and around this area, this is kind of a hub for research in this area. I'd be really interested in it. And lucky that a job came open. And this is my fourth season.
Okay.
Like you guys are with the podcast. I started up here in the COVID year, and that was a little bit of shock to the senses.
That's why we started this program. Actually, was the shutdown, lockdown, when we weren't supposed to have any meetings. So we started this as a virtual meeting.
Absolutely, and we started up here, and basically everybody was home, and I was learning a new position, kind of on my own a little bit. So that was a little bit of a shock, but everything worked out, and really happy to be here with you.
Okay, cool. So rice, I assume that's flooded.
It is flood irrigation.
Right?
Most of it. They're trying out some different things now. But we were always flood irrigated.
I would love to find, if I was a rice grower, I'd love to find a new way to do that, to where I didn't have to do.
It's a nightmare.
That always. I've traveled a little bit in Arkansas. Did a little bit of work in Arkansas. Obviously, I've never raised rice, but that looks to me like one of the most difficult crops you could
labor intensive. It's beat you down, all the irrigation with flood irrigation with levees and putting in all the levee gates. Growing up as a kid, I would get 50 cents a levee gate to put in.
Wow.
So I felt pretty good whenever I could leverage that into a knee board or something to go to the lake with. But I'm starting to think I was vastly underpaid at that time.
Yeah, my dad tells stories about getting 2 cents a bale for square bale and hay.
Yeah,
and I think I'd rather square bale hay for 2 cents a bale than put in levee gates.
It's miserable, but
and the weather's always so pleasant.
It just sticks to you.
Yeah,
so that's wonderful.
I'm a hefty guy. Heat and humidity are not my friends.
Here, whenever people complain about it being hot, I'm like, you don't know.
Yeah. No, I've been down there enough to know you are right about that. So rice and soybean farmer, went to college in weed science. Accidentally ended up in this part of the country through the contest. Probably being hosted by one of our competitors.
Well, by every one of them.
Okay.
Because it was the Weed Olympics that year, and so since this is a hub of research sites,
is there 3 companies here?
So you have ourselves,
right,
and we're kind of separated from the rest. We have a site here that we own fully.
Yeah.
Bayer does. But just right down the road, about 2 more miles down the road, there's BSF, Valent, and Corteva. So whenever that contest was going on, it was actually hosted down there. Now, Bayer also participated and supported the entire contest, but really it was those other sites you could see because we are a little separated from those.
Isn't there a Syngenta site around here somewhere too?
Syngenta, I know there's one farther north of Syngenta site, and there's looks like a breeding facility a little farther south. So they kind of split the difference here. I think one's up around Clinton, which is north of us. Another south, maybe around Mattoon. But yeah, they don't have one just right here with the rest.
Well,
of
you had commented that it's crazy that Piatt County, and we're right on the county line here. We're actually Champaign County here, but you know, Piatt County usually is competing for the highest average yields in the, you know, if not in the state, in the country, for different crops. And, you know, the ability to raise 73 bushel soybeans for a county average with minimal irrigation,
it's remarkable,
and not putting in a single levee gate, you know, probably seems like, you know, like part-time farming or something to a kid from Arkansas.
It's the easy button, but when you look at land prices, they follow that as well.
There's a trade-off for that. So I'm wearing my daughter made this T-shirt for me. We're the big corn grows T-shirt here. So we are certainly where the big corn grows, and there's a reason why, you know, all the companies have a presence in this area, not too far from the university, and so there's a tremendous, is kind of like, you know, Illinois' version of Research Triangle Park here as far as herbicide research goes. So I guess let's talk a little bit about, you're doing the field work early on in development.
Correct.
How do products get to you?
So we are at our site, us and another site, we are deemed one of the early development research sites. So really, we are the first look of crop protection products in the field after they've been synthesized in the lab. They get looked at in the greenhouses in Germany. Then we're kind of that first step of research in the field. We really are heavy in herbicide research here, whereas another site may be a little heavier in a bit of insecticide research, a little fungicide research, but we're really heavy in herbicide here. So what that means is we do a lot of really kind of what we call screening trials. So we're going to put out a lot of different species of crops, species of weeds.
Plant weeds, probably.
We do.
We do. Farmers love that.
We don't do that at our offsite locations, but we do them here where we own it. So don't worry. But it's really kind of a broad approach, because we may not know much about this chemistry, or they may not know really much about the chemistry. They just have tested in the greenhouse, say, hey, this has some positive results there, but how does it look in the field? Because obviously greenhouse is different in the field. So we do a lot of broad approaches just to get a baseline of, you know, do we have crop tolerance? Do we have efficacy that's to a certain level? And, you know, a lot of people like to position our role as, you know, developing chemistry or taking that molecule and pushing it down the pipeline. But a lot of that early step is taking that molecule and kicking out the ones that don't really work. So if you kind of think of it backwards, there's more what we do early, and then we start refining those ones that we didn't kick out of the process a little further down the line before they get to market development in our next group. But this is ongoing with multiple other types of research that also is doing the same thing between environmental and toxicology and different things as well, all ongoing at the same time.
So you know, I guess, tell us a few things. I mean, it's obvious to me and a farmer that if a product doesn't kill anything, it's going to get kicked out, or if it doesn't control anything, it's going to get kicked out. You know, what are some other maybe more environmental type things that will get products kicked out?
You know, I'm really not in the environmental side, so I can't speak on it completely. But there's all kinds of work in, you know, toxicology for off-target species, animals, aquatics, all kinds of different things like that also kick them out. But for us, it's really
the efficacy part.
Efficacy part. It's the It's
Do
the
you
crop
guys
tolerance part.
do any persistence stuff? Is like, does it last long enough versus too long?
We do persistence on a basis of residual activity.
Okay.
So kind of what you would think about of is this persistence a benefit?
Right.
Now we have the tools to do long-term persistence studies, soil cores, but really I think our site has been transitioned with the merger. Maybe other sites or other groups were more positioned for that type of research. We can still do some of that and provide samples, and absolutely, but really our persistence is based on the efficacy.
Right.
And maybe it's replanting. We do a lot of persistence work there, and a lot of that's generally done after we do that first step of, does it kill anything? Does it work?
Right.
But then once we kind of move a product a little further down the line, if we understand that it has a persistent nature, we're going to do recropping, multiple plant back timings of crops and evaluating that just to help develop what that herbicide label or that pesticide label is going to be eventually.
Right.
Yeah.
We always, farmers always want that season-long weed control, and things that last longer typically are, preferred by farmers.
Right.
But there is such a thing as lasting too long.
Absolutely.
And
there absolutely is.
And you can't be, so persistent that you really can't be a viable product because it doesn't break down in the environment the way you want things to. So
there's a specific area where persistence really is a good thing.
Right.
Under that, I mean, obviously we have products that aren't persistent, and that's okay because maybe there's a post-emergence, and that's fine. Persistence is also good, but to a certain extent.
Right. Yeah. Right. So you said primarily herbicides, but you could get involved in insecticide, fungicide, whatever work.
So obviously we've spoken on it a bit. We are a heavy corn and soy production area,
right?
But that's not the only research we do here. We have orchards as well that we do work on. It's going to be, herbicide, insecticide, fungicide on those. We do a lot of vegetable crops as well that we're growing because we're a very broad business. It's not just the commodity crops that we are developing products for. So we have on site for our field solutions side, we have 4 scientists. And I really work primarily in the herbicide space, but we have other scientists that may work more in the orchards, vineyards, and vegetable crop space. So there's a diversity here as well. So we're not just kind of one specific thing. We are flexible with what the needs are of our pipeline at the moment. Yeah.
So how big is this facility here? How many people? Kind of what kind of capacity, I guess, do we have?
Absolutely. So we have our site is 200 acres. So it's a pretty large site.
It is.
We can run quite a bit of research here. We've run more in the past through some of the mergers and divestments. Some groups have moved out. We're looking at, pulling more in now. So we've been heavier in the past. We're a little lighter right now, but looking at bringing more in. But 200 acres here. We have within Field Solutions, we have 4 scientists full-time. We have a site superintendent and an admin specialist as well. We also bring on summer associates every year. So if anybody's interested in being a summer associate, feel free to reach out.
Is that the more politically correct term for an intern?
It is. Okay. I think there's different connotations with intern, summer associate within. I don't want to get myself in trouble, but we generally call them summer associates here. But we generally bring in 3 or so summer associates during the growing season. But that's just the Field Solutions side.
Right,
so this is actually a shared side.
Right, because we're sitting on the
other
side.
The NAFTO side right now, which is the North American Field Testing Organization. And that's just a different organization that does a little hybrid work between breeding and crop protection. They kind of do it all, but a little bit further down the pipe we are. So sometimes some of our later trials, we may be running some of the same trials because they're a little later in our pipeline and kind of that threshold of handing the product off to the next group. But we work together. It's a really good working relationship. Our NAFTO colleagues generally are kind of capturing that G by E interaction,
Right.
genetic by environment.
Right.
So they may have multiple
locations,
and they're going to travel to multiple areas. And we do travel as well, not to the same extent, but we're capturing when we travel, we're capturing a different maybe resistance profile of a weed species and working offsite, or we're capturing a higher level of disease in a certain area compared to what we can get here naturally. So we do travel, but not as much as the NAFTA group definitely does.
Right. And they would be the group that does our hybrid and variety trials for breeding, and I work more closely with them on the seed side of things. So you might have mentioned this, but was there a particular weed species that you worked with in college?
Well, I mean, it's the elephant in the room.
Okay.
Palmer amaranth was our big driver weed species.
Right.
Up here, it's water hemp with that. It's it's starting to get more Palmer here than there has been.
Right. Yeah, I mean, for those who haven't been around Palmer, it's water hemp on steroids is what I call Palmer.
Yeah, so. It's a doozy for sure. But that was the big driver back home.
Right.
Here's water hemp. And really our offsite locations are capturing different resistance profiles of water hemp that we're working on here. We have a couple of PPO resistance locations and HPPD resistant location. So that's where we're doing kind of our satellite work. We do have resistance here, but really it's just glyphosate on our farm, glyphosate resistant water hemp. So that's the one that's driving a lot of decisions, and that's what a lot of work goes into. But we don't lose track of the other species as well. Sure. Obviously, our grass species are becoming more difficult to control and are becoming an issue. And just different geographies, you have different specific drivers that we absolutely capture and investigate.
That's one aspect of weed resistance that knock on wood we have kind of avoided is the grass species being a problem. Worldwide, I believe resistance in grass species is
big issue.
Far more of an issue than dicots. But for us, it's primarily been water hemp. Has been the poster child. Mare's tail as well as another one. But for us, it's been the dicot species. But a lot of people fight resistance in grasses.
I think the grasses are very troubling with what's going. The glyphosate resistant grasses are very difficult. When you have that glyphosate resistance, it's fairly easier to develop, ACCase resistance. So that's kind of that's a graminicide that a lot of people spray for grass control. You can fairly easier develop resistance to those. So before you know it, you have a very difficult species to control. We absolutely capture those. We don't really have that in this geography. But down south, we're capturing that as a company for sure.
Right. And that's as a legacy Monsanto guy, that's what's cool to me about Bayer is our ability to, develop new herbicides, develop new modes of action, new sites of action, all the new products that we've got to work with.
Right.
I mean, Monsanto had really been out of chemical discovery. And I joined them in 93, and we weren't really in chemical discovery even then.
Right.
We had shifted into, biotech, and seeds was going to be our future. And we were obviously still selling a lot of herbicides then.
Right.
And we had a lot of herbicide technology relative to formulation technology and improving molecules.
Right.
But we weren't looking for new molecules.
Right.
And that to me is what's cool about Bayer. And we've got a lot of new stuff coming that's pretty exciting.
Very exciting.
And we've been talking about water hemp and Palmer. And one of the molecules that I'm sure you probably have been working on is kind of a water hemp specialist. And typically a herbicide in history, herbicides that control two weeds, probably worthless.
No.
But if you're going to control only two weeds, Palmer and water hemp would be two good weeds to control.
Absolutely.
So I'll let you talk about that process.
Yeah, and really with how we do research, my first year, I caught the back end of diflufenacan.
Yep.
It had been moved on to our market development colleagues at that point, or we were kind of in that transition. I caught some in our offsite locations doing some PPO work. But
so that gives our listener kind of a good illustration of how early you are.
Exactly.
Because you touched a product 1 year that we aren't selling yet 4 years ago.
Right.
So there's 4 or 5 years, after you hand it off before it gets to the grower.
Right.
And so Zach really is pretty early on from a field standpoint in research, because everybody I work with and everything I do comes after what he does.
Right.
And before you have a chance to buy that.
Yeah, you really think a product is going to be about a 10-year process at the earliest to bring it to market from discovery. Diflufenacan wasn't one that was from discovery. It was actually being used in Europe.
Right.
We just didn't really have that fit for it. Like you said, it's a specialist.
Right.
It was used in I think the grass grain species in Europe. It's very, very interesting as that specialist. Really brings a lot to the table from it's not a new mode of action globally,
right,
but it's a new mode of action regionally that we have not utilized.
Because it's a group 12?
It is a group 12, yes.
Yeah, which I'm not familiar with group 12.
That's not many people are, because there's not many out there that group 12. I think it falls pretty close in line with, it's a pigment inhibitor, affects photosynthesis. You will, the one that kind of reminded me of, and this goes back to rice days, is clomazone. It's also used in other areas, not just rice, but it's kind of that bleaching pre-emergence type of product, and very interesting product, and the efficacy it brings to that specific species. If a farmer is dealing, especially with like PPO resistance, where a lot of our pre-emergence herbicides are leveraging that PPO chemistry. If you're having issues there, a really great fit to boost your program approach to weed control, and also kind of boost your not developing the resistance to those others. Adding that additional active to the profile is always a good thing. I think we understand that more now than ever. So
right. Yeah, I mean, my expectation is, and you give me your perspective on this, we need to make advancements to keep weed control at the level of difficulty that it is today.
Yeah.
I don't know that I expect it to get easier.
No.
I hope we can keep it from not getting harder than it is today. Would be a good goal.
I agree. And I think that I'm a cup half full type of guy. I think that there's very interesting things going on from a research side. I just know that within our pipeline, I'm extremely excited with what we have coming. But just approaching it from a crop protection side is not really the only way that advancements are being made currently. From the biotech side, we're looking at a lot more robust HT traits coming down the road that'll allow more flexibility for developing that full season weed control program. But, it might not just be from biotech or from crop protection. If it's from cultural practices, if it's from different ways of applying these products, there's a lot of innovation going on that I'm excited about merging together and what that brings to the table.
Yeah, I mean, a friend of mine, his son got his master's working on some of the seed destructor technology.
Like the Harrington seed destructor.
Yeah. And that, it didn't. I had a hard time envisioning, what are we going to do about crop residue and how practical is that? But there are people out there that think that stuff like that's just going to become part of a tool in the toolbox.
Exactly.
To help suppress, culturally,
get
rid of seed.
If you can reduce that weed seed bank is the number one step to making your life easier.
Right.
As a farmer controlling weeds. And so that's just one step. And that's, I like to say it's a passive approach, but it costs in infrastructure and add-ons to the combine and horsepower requirements to run that system. But it's kind of adding these multiple layers on top, because weeds are really amazing from a biological perspective. If you approach them in just one way, it's kind of like Jurassic Park, where he's sitting there and he's saying, well, they're all the dinosaurs are female. How do they reproduce? And life will find a way. I'm not saying that's exactly what's going on, but life does find a way. Right. And if you can approach in multiple aspects, you can kind of keep them off balance and not able to just to overcome a system in just one way. So if that's going to be crop protection, that's going to be cultural practices and different things. I think it's extremely interesting in what we can do now. I think it's interesting in what we can do now from an accuracy standpoint of GPS enabled systems on our crop equipment, farming equipment, and what that can bring to the table from a tillage, from a planting inter-row, there's just all kinds of opportunities that would not have been possible without some of the technology that's coming to market nowadays. Right. And overlapping these new emerging technologies, we have a daunting task. There's no doubt. But again, I'm a fairly cup half full kind of guy that if we bring these new things that we didn't have before, that we didn't have an understanding of before, and it's going to be a shock to try to implement all these things. It's not going to be easy at first, but we are an innovative group as a whole. Farmers are inquisitive. They're going to come up with ways to overcome. Right. And I'm fairly excited about what's coming down the pipelines of different avenues and what that means.
Right. I think one thing to me, and this has been talked about a lot with water hemp in particular, its ability to overcome different control mechanisms. And we work a lot with rootworm, obviously on the insect side, and their ability to adapt. I mean, they overcame crop rotation, even, and things that you wouldn't think an organism would develop. You think of something you spray on it. If you use it often enough, something's probably going to get resistant to it. But you don't think of crop rotation as as something that they would overcome with resistance. But nature will find a way, as you said, and that the metabolism-based resistance that water hemp seems to be able to become, it's become resistant to things that it's never even been exposed to.
Yes,
which is really
that's really troubling.
Right, yes. Right. We used to think that for a weed to become resistant, you might have to overuse something, or you'd have to subject it to a lot of selection pressure.
Not necessarily
the case.
That's absolutely. They're always finding new ways of overcoming. I think one of the oldest examples and one of the most interesting, you think, how does a weed overcome, simply being hand weeded? Well, the oldest example of basically weed resistance is mimicry to the crop, which made it more barnyard grass and rice. It started mimicking the exact color of rice, the kind of leaf structure, to where it was more difficult to hand weed. Right. So there's always different ways that things are happening.
Which you can think how that would happen. I mean, that one that happened to look like a rice plant, you didn't pull it, and it survived.
Yep.
And over time, it's interesting. So I think there's lots of, we are, I farm. You grew up on a farm. Farmers are always, it's hard work. You're always looking for a way to save some time. You're always looking for a way to save some labor. We tend to gravitate towards the easy things. And,
understandable.
And not that it's easy, it's still hard, but easier is usually pretty attractive for a product. And so we tend to, we find something that works and we use it to death.
Yes.
In some cases, especially if it's an easy thing. Tillage is long been, that was like the first form of weed control, and with reduced till systems and no-till systems, and we've kind of moved away from tillage, and there are those that think that we someday may need to move back towards more tillage and not rely 100% on chemistry.
Yeah.
We've got cover crops, and I've talked with some cover crop people that you think about the ability of cover crops to. You talk about reducing the weed seed bank. Well, if you're suppressing the germination of weeds with a cover crop, that's fewer weeds that are going to be subjected to selection. And so the use of a cover crop might slow the development of problems as well, just by reducing the population. But
what if that one weed species or that one water hemp was out there that was carrying a new resistance, and it never made it to the light of day because the cover crop was keeping it from emerging?
Some ryegrass plants smothered
it's all these overlapping control mechanisms, and it's not going to be easy. It's going to be complex. And I think the complexity of it is what's going to be the most challenging part. Right now it's complex. Like, farmers call you up. What resistance does this, this certain seed line have? What does all these names mean? You have all these different companies, and that's not going away. We're getting more complex as it goes. And I think a lot of the things we're going to have to overcome is going to have to be education on a lot of these things, because it's not going to be easy. But again, farmers are extremely smart. They understand their systems. They're looking for better ways of doing things. And if you can show the value of utilizing some of these systems, I think a lot are going to sign on for it. It's going to be interesting in how everything works together, but it's going to be complex. It's going to be some learning difficulties.
First. I mean, I think, back in the early days of the Roundup Ready era, I mean, I think enrollment in weed science programs kind of took a dip there, because people thought, well, all you got to do is spray Roundup. What am I going to do?
Yeah, two shots of Roundup,
and it got super simple there for a while.
Yeah.
But now we're entering back into a level of complexity, kind of like it was before the Roundup Ready era, where you're going to be using 4 or 5 different things, and you got to know what you're going after, and you got to know what you're doing. It's just not as easy as it was for a while. And I think I probably had the pleasure of enjoying a good chunk of my career in what was possibly the easiest weed control era ever.
It's amazing.
And it ain't coming back,
Even if we developed the new Roundup, completely separate, we would not approach it in the same way, because we learn from our mistakes. That's human nature. So even if we had that one setting there coming with a HT trait that was going to do the exact same thing that Roundup did, we'd approach it completely different, because we've learned from our mistakes, to be honest. And so I don't think we're ever going to see that silver bullet approach come back, but that's a good thing, because of how difficult it is to create these chemistries. There's how difficult it is to bring them to market. The longevity, the cost associated with that is huge. Even if we could sell more product by just wholesale marketing to the entire area, just this one thing, we wouldn't do it, because we understand the risk associated with resistance and what that would, the hurt that it would bring to farmers and honestly to a business. We want to protect our products from resistance development. That's in our best interest. So we would. I don't think we're ever going to see the late 90s, early 2000s.
And I think the challenge for the producer is virtually everything you do to, I don't think prevent resistance is probably realistic, but slow it, manage it, whatever term you want to use, is going to add production cost into the system.
Yes,
because doing what's easy and economical, might not be the best weed management program. But if the field's clean, and it's cheaper, there's always going to be a, pressure to, well, how can I cut some costs out of this? And when you look at using, multiple products and different modes of actions, and maybe this product would get the job done barely, but this one's going to get the job done better. Better way to manage the weeds. But if it's a higher cost, then the grower's going to have to look at that trade-off. And that's what I struggle with from a producer standpoint is, okay, if this is better weed management, fine. But if it costs $10 an acre, this weed management here is good enough.
Exactly. It's you always have to understand, are you surviving doing this? And it is, I mean, I grew up in a farming family. It's thin margins. Some years are downright scary if you're going to make it to the next one. I understand, and we're going to have to be cognizant of that to our approaches. We can't make a layered approach that prices out people from being able to do
it. Well, and I think weed scientists have always thought that there was a good long-term benefit to better weed management, because you're going to delay a problem, you might prevent a problem, you're going to save yourself in the future. But it's always hard to make that argument that it's worth it to spend another $10 today that you don't have to, because that might make 10 years from now better for you.
It's extremely hard to quantify the cost onto everybody, on the farmers across the board of resistance. It's hard to quantify that, but it's a huge cost. Think about if we didn't have glyphosate resistance right now. I mean, the savings that would be on farmers currently. But it was kind of tried. There's different approaches to pest control. When you think about weed science to entomology, they use more of a threshold approach in entomology. Thresholds approach.
We have a threshold too. It's called perfect.
Yeah. Thresholds were approached in weed science, in the same way, but that risk of resistance and the nature of how the weed species proliferate in your specific field. If you let it go, it's not flying off and going somewhere else. It's happening right in your home.
Well, and it doesn't some insects don't overwinter. So sometimes you get to reset the clock every year. Not the case with weed seed.
No. So there's a hidden cost to resistance that is hard to quantify and hard to add into that per acre price every year of what your crop protection program looks like. But it's something you have to be cognizant of, or you're doing yourself a disservice.
So, well, I feel like Zach and I have been just talking nonstop here. I don't see anything coming in on the chat. If you do have a question for Zach or for me or for Melissa, for that matter, please chat one in. We like to interact with the live audience as much as we can. I made a page of notes here, so don't worry. Zach and I got more things we can talk about, but don't feel bad about interrupting. If you got a question, chat it in. So we've kind of talked a lot about weed management. We've talked a little bit about what we've got going on at Bear. We talked about your background. I guess let's talk a little bit more about what you see coming in the future of weed control. Is it new practices? Is it new products? Is it new ways of doing things? We kind of touched on that a little bit already, but I guess where do you see you're young in your career? You got another 30 years left to go. What do you see changing in the future?
I think we are coming upon a very interesting time of new developments across the board. So I kind of mentioned it before. One of the major developments that I think that we're going to be leveraging, and we don't even really realize how much it is the GPS accuracy and the accuracy of our systems that are running our equipment. Whereas before, maybe you were trying to do a tillage to control weeds, but you're always running that risk of running over crops and causing that yield loss. Now we are much more safe from something like that because we can leverage those systems. So if it's making a spray application more accurate, if it's making a tillage, if it's making a inter-row stripping of a cover crop more accurate, or things like that, then all those things are interesting aspects that we may not have had the ability to do 10 years ago, but we're on the cusp of it to really roll out. And those are more of the cultural aspects and not even getting into where I think is very exciting as well from crop protection development aspect. We have, there's been a lot of publication on developing the first new mode of action in the last 30 years or so. And, we're extremely excited about that product. There's been a little bit of information come out now about it, but, we have a product that I'm extremely excited about seeing, and the ability that what it could bring to the table from new modes of action, resistance management, a new tool in the tool belt, extremely exciting. And one of these things that's exciting, I believe, is from the merger of Bayer and Monsanto, now you have a crop protection wing and a genetics and biotech wing. And now we can start working together much earlier in the process than was possible before. So once we, maybe even if a product isn't completely down the pipeline and approved and we're going to the market with it, we're already, working on ways to introduce that in what does it look like in a tolerant system? How do we develop that system? So instead of being a, potential, say, 10-year lag period of launch the product to a trait coming out with it, if you're going to develop a trait, and not every product gets a trait. That there's products that work without traits, and those are valuable. We need those. But if we can develop a trait, now we can start developing it much earlier. And that's extremely exciting because you're just adding a new tool quicker.
Well, I mean, it used to be, you'd mentioned that you guys still do crop safety work with new molecules. And obviously, if we find something that has great efficacy that is crop safe, that doesn't need a trait, that's awesome. But a lot of really, really good potential chemistry is going to need a trait. And so that ability to develop them both concurrently together, there are a lot of benefits there, and I agree with you on that.
If you came out in the summer and watched us do some applications, we do some very specific ones, you would think we're almost going back in time, because you'll see us pull out a in-a-row application sprayer, one that you'd see used in like cotton today for like a lay-by application, things like that. Because
like a what I'd call a hooded
sprayer. It's an in-a-row hooded sprayer.
Because
what we're interested in seeing is, if this is a compound that we think could have potential in an HT trait, how do we evaluate what an HT trait would look like in crop before we can actually have that HT trait developed? So we're actually doing some work that almost looks like we're going back in time with in-a-row applications, just because we're trying to look at that full season approach before we have some of these traits that we're hopeful that we're currently trying to develop as well. So we've approached things differently in the past few years because of the merger and because of that ability we have to work together.
Well, I think we haven't really talked about the See and Spray technology that's out there, and that's not necessarily something that I don't know that Bayer is really involved in the front lines of, but from a chemical development standpoint, it's interesting, because you used to think that, okay, if we came up with the most awesome thing in the world, but it costs $1,000 an acre, it's worthless, because it's not worth $1,000. Weed control is not worth $1,000 an acre in corn and soybeans. But if you only need to spray 5% of the field, it might work. And so you could, in theory, develop products that are so astronomically expensive, you couldn't ever use them across the whole landscape. But if you could just hit the resistant weeds that you have to, that might open up a whole new realm of products.
And that exact thought process is going on with products we're developing. We kind of call them gold-plated products because we could not bring them to market just like they are. But exactly like you said, if you reduce that application amount per acre by 100-fold, now it makes sense. And there's still some difficulties with that. I think a lot of companies are trying to decide, if you bring a product to market that you're only using 1/100th of the active ingredient, how do you make your return back on developing that product? And and there's going to be a lot of learning going on between companies and how we develop products for new technologies. But there's the opportunity is there now, like you said, to bring a product that conventionally would not make sense.
Right. Well, and today, the infrastructure has to change a lot too, because today we're spraying a tank mix of, say, 4 different actives. And yeah, you don't need all 4 of those actives on every acre. But if you need one of them on every acre, and the second one on this 10% of the acres, and that one on that 10% of the acres, you can't apply that as a tank mix. And, we have injection systems on sprayers, but we don't really have anything with like 5 different independent injection systems on a sprayer. And it just kind of blows my mind to think about, okay, there's a lot of things that you could do. Can we make it practical? Can we make it feasible? Can we make it affordable? Can we make it fit into, our application systems that we have today?
Yeah. And I didn't even hit on that aspect of what's exciting about coming up, but spatially relevant information is, I'm very heavy into spatial relevancy within my work. I'm kind of leading the charge on leveraging GPS technologies, how we use that within how we are doing work. But if you think about that for a farmer and more exact applications of, like you said, I only need this product in this 10% of area, or maybe I need to adjust my rate because my organic matter down here is higher but lower up here, and I'm not making that blanket application. Spatially relevant data and connecting to your systems, I think, is a ripe area for change. We've really kind of understood this more from a variable rate fertilizer application for the last few years. That's really been where a lot of that spatial data has been understood and starting to be utilized. But what if you have a smart label now that you load to a system that references spatial data, understands where maybe you've done some scouting and you have that species there, you don't have it in this side of the field, you have that risk of a watershed here, but you don't have it on this part of the field. Things that are hard stops on labels right now, where you'd say maybe I wouldn't even spray that entire field because of the watershed that's down here. Now I can spray 7/8 of that field, but only this area is in that watershed area. So there's changing ways that may not be as understandable or cool or as just a new mode of action, but that could completely change the game. Really interesting. And one other approach that I think is going to be interesting, and it's kind of a scary topic, but it's AI, artificial intelligence. We as a company are fairly early adopters and heavy into the idea of utilizing AI in our systems. What does AI do for our crop protection development program? Does AI enable us to discover new molecules that we would not have been able to discover traditionally? I think to try to understand what advancements are coming is a daunting task, and I'm no person that can say I understand it all. But I think it's exciting in a way. How do these things completely change the dynamic of the system of how we've done things traditionally? How does it potentially speed up to market products? And that only benefits farmers as well. How does it, knock out products that we were maybe wasting time developing and more narrow our approach and bring products faster? How does it understand and synthesize products that we didn't even think were possible, and modes of action within plants that we didn't even understand? So I think from that aspect, you could see a complete change in how the crop protection development system today is run and how it looks in 10 years. And this is complete spitballing, but I think, it's going to be fairly wide open in all the different aspects of how agriculture can change. And then we're just only talking about, weed control and crop efficacy, and not even capturing other aspects of agriculture
Right,
where
right.
innovation is exploding.
Sure. And that's, where science and technology can go. I mean, there's just kind of no limit to that. And, on the breeding side, we're transitioning from for years and years and years and years, we've been getting better and better and better at identifying the product that we want.
Right.
And developing the product that we want, but we're on the cusp of having the technology to create the product that we want.
Yeah.
And, there's probably opportunities within chemistry for that.
Yeah.
There's probably opportunities to, engineer a molecule that will do this.
Yes.
We know what we need to have, and you can't find it, but you might be able to make it.
Exactly. Just things that were not remotely possible.
Right.
It's extremely exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So good. Maybe if you got a young person at home that's looking for a summer job, you can be an associate with Bear working
Absolutely.
for the summer and get a little bit of his infectious excitement with what's coming in the future. So I think unless there's anything else you'd like to share with us today, Zach, I think we'll probably go ahead and wrap up a little bit early here. And appreciate you for hanging with us on the first episode of Ask the Agronomist here for season 4. We'll be back with you again in 2 weeks, probably from maybe the normal location. Won't be at a exotic place like White Heath here.
Oh, exotic is what everybody says about it.
So if you're wondering where in the hell is White Heath, so we're not far from Muhammad.
Not far.
I drove through Muhammad on my way here. I drove through Seymour on my way here,
yep.
which is kind of like White Heath. You live where?
I live in Monticello.
Okay, so Monticello is not too far from here. So there's places you've heard of that aren't far from here if you're not familiar with White Heath. So, but thanks for being with us, Melissa. Thanks for making the trip over early this morning. Melissa and I left home pretty early this morning. She coming from the east and I coming from the west. To pull this off here this morning. Really appreciate your help, Zach. It was great to visit with you and get to know you a little bit and introduce one of our frontline researchers to folks here on Ask the Agronomist. Everybody take care.